You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills, guys. This is the Air Raid Hour presented by Picasso's Pizza and Cover One. Obviously, the major breaking news story of today is something that we're going to lead off the show with. It's not something, Dave and I sort of agreed to before the show. It's not something we want to spend the entire 45 minutes on. There are some other things that we want to get to, and we want to talk. Accused court. I think I lost my internet again. Is it back?
Yeah, you're back now.
We got my internet. I'm good. All right. Sorry. My internet's been a little wonky today. He has been accused in civil court of gang rape of a minor in California in an incident that occurred last October with some of his teammates at San Diego State. The one thing I'm going to say here is he is not playing football tonight for the Buffalo Bills. He showed up at the football stadium. He was not in any Bills sanctioned gear. He was not out on the field warming up. He will not be out on the field during the game. That is the correct decision from the Buffalo Bills. My take on this right now, and again, it's sort of jumbled and meshed because I really don't. It's really tough to put into words and to frame sort of what's going on. But to me, Matt Araiza should not be playing football until this issue is settled. Whether it's more evidence comes out and you have all the ammunition you need to release him and all that stuff, or whether something comes out that exonerates him, whatever that is. Until we get further clarification, until this investigation plays out, Matt Araiza should not step foot on a football field. The first instinct should always be to sort of believe women. So the Bills are doing the right thing tonight. It's going to be interesting to see how that progresses over the course of next week. How do the Buffalo Bills keep Matt Araiza off the football field while this is playing out? It appears like he can't go on the commissioner's exempt list because this happened before he was in the NFL. It appears like the Buffalo Bills probably can't suspend him. Could there be a situation where they can get him to agree to walk away from the team and put him on IR like Calvin Ridley took a leave for, to take a mental break when he was with Atlanta? Can the Bills suspend him? Do the Bills have to outright release him? I don't know what the situation is or sort of how it will resolve itself, but he should not be stepping on the football field until this issue is resolved. And if he is even legitimately at all culpable of the things he's been accused of, he should never step on a football field again. Dave, what are your thoughts here on this?
Yeah, so firstly, right, we have to kind of separate the court of public opinion and the court of law, right? The court of public opinion has ruled already on this, right? And no matter what happens with Matt Araiza from this point on, if he is cleared of all these accusations, et cetera, the reputation of Matt Araiza will forever be tarnished, even if he is found cleared of these things. And Jessica Tennis made a good point earlier before the show started around the Duke lacrosse team. They were found to be innocent, but the fact of the matter is there is a stigma around Duke lacrosse and those guys forever, regardless, because they were associated with that. And you can't put yourself in a situation even where you're going to be associated with that, whether or not you're guilty or not. And we will find out whether he is. So what I think Judge is saying here is that the court of law states that someone is innocent until proven guilty, but the court of public opinion and what the Bills decide to do with Matt Araiza, the football player, has nothing to do with the court of law. They can decide to cut him for their own reasons, for whatever they want to do. Now, they can take the stance of, we're going to see how it plays out in the court of law and make our decision based on that. Or they don't have to do that. They don't have to do that. They are an organization that can make their decision on what they want to do, regardless of what the court of law outcome is or waiting for it. So we really got to separate those things. And organizationally, regardless of sort of what happens with Matt Araiza, the Bills are in the spotlight now in the court of public opinion to make some decisions here. So the decision tonight is that he's not playing, which is the right decision. Decision was also made, obviously, to not allow him to wear any Bills sanctioned gear, which I think is it is a little bit above the bare minimum at this point, right? Like, okay, not playing, fine, but then like, okay, you're not wearing our team gear either.
Yeah.
That's fine. And so that's what I'll say about it for now, right? Clearly, this is a very important topic, and people have a lot of there's a lot of emotion around this topic. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll just kind of see where it goes from here.
And so Ned Ryerson comes in and says, so judge's suggestion, we consider someone guilty and proven innocent. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying first of all, personally, my first instinct is to believe the woman. Yes, that is my first instinct. But at the end of the day as well, you cannot put someone on the football field who could possibly be a rapist. You can't do that. That's not something that you can do. The Buffalo Bills are making the right decision not to play him today. And again, until this issue resolves itself, you can't put him on the football field. Jessica Tennis says, let it play out. Yes, let it play out, but let it play out with him on the sideline. He shouldn't be punting a football for the Buffalo Bills until this situation resolves itself.
Yep.
And I mean, speaking of the punting situation, Micah Hyde is going to be the holder today. It looks like Matt Barkley is going to be punting. So this game is going to be weird, man. There's a lot of emotions flying around. I'm probably not going to be on social media doing this game. Who knows if I'll even watch this whole thing, but for a football team that a week ago we were talking about, and it's nice to see either Jay Spence or Joe Miller's burner in the chat. I appreciate you. You can have fun in Blockland. But for a team a week ago that everyone was writing articles about how professional they were and how there was only one thing that this team had its mind on, and that was winning the Super Bowl. And they were a team on a mission. Chris Sims had that tweet. It has all gone off the rails so ridiculously quickly. And it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of football team you see on the field today.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. I mean, the timing's good or bad depending how you look at this, right? Like, it can be good depending on the fact that this game is really kind of the equivalent of years past of what the fourth preseason game was, which is essentially like, this is a game for the guys trying to make the roster. No one of note is really going to play of significant playing time. So you can look at that as it being a good thing, but you could also look at it as a bad thing with the timing of all of this entire situation happening right before the season's going to start and right before this game, before the Bills have to make final cut downs. And obviously with some of the other information we know about, did the Bills know about this beforehand? Did they know about this before they cut Matt Hawk? Like, all these other things. And so from that perspective, it's not great. And it's going to be an interesting game tonight. I'm really going to just try to focus on some of the things that we've been talking about throughout the summer and the last few weeks, like guys trying to make the roster are really going to be, it's not fair to them, right? Because some of the attention's been taken away from guys really like fighting for their jobs, for their livelihoods. And that is unfortunately been kind of, the focus has not kind of been removed on that, but that when the game starts is really what I'm going to be focused on.
Yeah. I mean, and the Bills too have their options. Like I said, the stance I'm taking is whatever you need to do to keep him on the football field, you do it until this matter resolves itself. The Bills have options. They're not great. I mean, a couple of punters have been released. You got Michael Pilardi, who the Bills have a history with. My eye is on what's going on in Tennessee. You have the battle between Grand Island native, one of the best punters in football, Brett Kern, and undrafted free agent Ryan Stonehouse, who we were a big fan of on this show in the pre-draft process. So you have Ryan Stonehouse and Brett Kern sort of going toe-to-toe in Tennessee. Someone's going to lose that battle. If it's Brett Kern, he's not subjected to waivers. He immediately becomes a free agent as a veteran. And something like the Bills might entice a guy like Brett Kern because he is a Buffalo native. Also, at the same time, Ryan Stonehouse, if he gets released, he loses out to the veteran Brett Kern. He's subjected to waivers, so it might be a little bit more difficult for him to get to the Buffalo Bills if another team is in need of a punter. But another punter might get waived over the course of the rest of this week too. So the Buffalo Bills have some options. And let's face it, this is a team that's not expecting to punt much this year. It was an exciting story to have a fun punter on the football field. It was an awesome story, but obviously now it's a distraction. If the Bills do decide to move on or whatever happens, or whatever comes about, the Buffalo Bills have some options out there at punter, and it's not the biggest thing in the world, in my opinion. Silas Whittle says, Hawk being cut needed to happen no matter what. He cost us games. He needed to go and get Stonehouse just for the name alone. Yeah, I mean, my take was always, even from the beginning of the season, I don't know why Matt Hawk was back. Like, he legitimately put this team in some really bad situations last year because he just couldn't handle the moment. Like, he was mishandling punts and he was making mistakes. So the fact that the Bills cut Matt Hawk doesn't upset me at all, because I think there's probably 10 guys on the street who could do what Matt Hawk does. So like, that doesn't bug me at all. And I don't think the Buffalo Bills are going to have a hard time trying to find a new punter. All right. So moving on now to the football game, and sort of not just the football game, but the implication that it has on the 53-man roster cuts that are going to happen on Tuesday. Let's just start with like what we're expecting from this football game, what we think to see. Let's just sort of like roll position by position over the next maybe 30 or so minutes here. And let's start with quarterback. I haven't seen a tweet basically telling me who's going to start this game, who's not. I'm sort of expecting Matt Barkley to go coast to coast. What do you think about what we're going to see at quarterback today? Josh Allen not playing is 100% for certain.
Yeah, you could almost see this even treated like as if Case Keenum was the starting quarterback of this football team tonight, as far as how this game might play out. You might see Case Keenum for a series or two, and then he'll likely give way to Matt Barkley to, as you say, go coast to coast. I don't think Case Keenum needs to play in this game. Case Keenum is coming off a high note against the Broncos, right? Obviously a bounce back performance he had against the Broncos compared to what happened against the Colts. And I think for his confidence and for his headspace, like, let him just coast into the season with that being the last bit of, last thing on his mind and the last play that he had. Like, I like the idea of Case Keenum going into the season with that positive momentum as the backup. Now you can put him in for a series or two and like give him some easy passes and maybe hand the ball off a bit, but like, not sure what that's really going to do for you from an evaluation standpoint. So
this game is weird in the sense that you have 80 players that you're playing with, 79 tonight, as opposed to like the 90. And I always thought that was weird, because if the third preseason game is now the fourth preseason game, you don't want to play a lot of your starters. I know Carolina is playing their starters. I think Carolina is handling this correctly. I thought the Buffalo Bills should have saved their starters for this game because they still have like a week and a half or whatever until they have to go and play the Rams, because they have that bye week built in. But I still think you're going to see a lot of those like high-end second string type of players. Like you might see Spencer Brown tonight, Bobby Hart, obviously not Cody Ford anymore because he's been traded, but Greg Van Roten, Greg Manx. Who knows? Like, guys like that could have to play a half. They could have to play into the third quarter. So maybe because of that, the Bills feel comfortable playing Case Keenum. Maybe he plays a half. Like, I'm not expecting that, but maybe he does. Who knows? Maybe he has Jamison Crowder and OJ Howard to throw to today. Maybe the Buffalo Bills are still trying to get these guys revved up, get them comfortable in the offense, get them comfortable in the playbook, get them some run. So, a lot of people, I think, just expect all of the backups tonight, myself included, but you could see a lot of these like fringe starters get a lot of run tonight. But one fringe starter who's not going to get some run tonight is going to be Zach Moss. So I did see that tweet that Zach Moss was off to the side. He wasn't, he was doing like the intense pregame warm-up that guys who usually aren't playing do. So it looks like Zach Moss isn't going to play tonight. I'm assuming Devin Singletary and James Cook aren't going to play tonight. Again, could be wrong on that regard. We'll find out when the game kicks off. But we could just be seeing a lot of Duke Johnson and Raheem Blackshear tonight. And the interesting thing about Raheem Blackshear is Raheem Blackshear has been the talk of the Buffalo Bills this preseason. I mean, he's absolutely blown up. A lot of people want to give him an active 53-man roster spot. The other people who clap back against that say there's just no room for him. So giving him like a half or 4 quarters to really continue to showcase his thing is going to make it harder to maybe clear him on the waiver wire. Part of me is expecting to see Matt Barkley chuck the ball like 50 times today. I don't even know if we're going to see a lot of running the football.
I mean, it is an interesting chess move to make, right? To hide guys that you want to put on the practice squad by not playing them in a prominent role tonight. We talk about like 4 or 5 maybe position battles where there's like roster spots up for grabs, but as you mentioned, like the guys got to put 11 guys out there on both sides of the ball, and you got to do it for 4 quarters. So it's not just like other guys are going to be playing tonight. So you just hope that they keep them out of harm's way. And, I wouldn't mind that situation because that kind of keeps Raheem Blackshear maybe under wraps a bit. The other flip side of the coin to that, though, is would you want to get as much run blocking practice as you possibly can? Because we know that that's been an area where the Bills have struggled, in the last couple of years is in the run blocking, pass blocking. They've been pretty good. So I could also see the flip side of that, and that's where your point around maybe a guy like Duke Johnson runs the ball 20 times tonight, and maybe that's a good thing for Duke Johnson, right? Because as we mentioned in the last at the post game on the last show, it's like Duke Johnson's an NFL vet. He's been around. Like he's gonna want to go to a team that is wanting to put him on an active roster. So him showing that he can still do his thing. Maybe it's the best of both worlds for the Bills in Duke Johnson if he gets the majority of the snaps running the ball because he's likely going to be cut anyway, and then he can latch on with another team.
Yeah, BFL Mafia News comes in and says, Judge, are you happy about Cody Ford? It's weird, right? Because Cody Ford is actually starting to grow on me a little bit the last couple of weeks. And then sure enough, it looks like maybe he was growing on a couple NFL GMs around the league because the Bills were able to drop a little bit of market for Cody Ford and get a 5th round draft pick for him. At the end of the day, even if Aaron Cromer, I shouldn't even say the Buffalo Bills, even if Aaron Cromer had resurrected Cody Ford, what are the chances that Cody Ford sees the field this year if Roger Saffold's in front of him? Because it seems like that's where Cody Ford was always playing his best football, was at left guard, and they kept trying to put him on the right side, and he struggled on the right side. And then what were the chances that the Buffalo Bills could convince Cody Ford, whose development they hindered for years, and then finally looked good in the preseason, but then was buried on the bench all year? What were the chances they could convince him to re-sign another contract with the football team because his contract is up at the end of the year? So I'm happy that we got something for him. Brandon Beane's got to take the L on drafting him. That was not a great draft decision. And maybe it was a good draft decision, but he didn't surround him with the proper coach. So you either got to take the L on Bobby Johnson or you got to take the L on Cody Ford or take the L on both. But kudos to him for getting something from it. Good on him for not falling for that sort of sunken cost, sort of thing where you feel like you need to keep trying just because you invested that 2nd round draft pick in him. But I'm perfectly content seeing Cody Ford going, and I'm happy we were able to get what we got for him. Dave, what are your thoughts on it?
I agree, and I think we talk about this a lot in the Cover One chat recently. Is like we oftentimes have a hard time separating the initial investment that was made, the cost to invest versus the cost of selling, and it's about cutting your losses at this point and getting something out of it, right? And kind of mitigating as much of the damage as possible. There's obviously a lot of theories, like what if Aaron Cromer, like you mentioned, surrounding him with the right people. What if Aaron Cromer was here from year 1 or year 2 with Cody Ford? Would he have turned out to be a different player for the Buffalo Bills? Very well could have, right? And we'll see very soon the effect Aaron Cromer may have on some of these guys that have been average NFL linemen throughout their careers and are now with the Bills, guys like David Questenberry, guys like Greg Van Roten. Like if these guys play above what they've shown in their past in the NFL, then okay, great. So the only thing that really kind of bugs me about it is still the depth behind the starters, right? And that's where, okay, like maybe if you don't really see a difference between a guy like Greg Van Roten and Cody Ford from an actual skills standpoint for 2022, then I kind of understand it. But the depth still is a little bit worrisome. I'm glad the Bills got what they could for him, and we do have to try to like just separate the fact that, like, look, not every, like, no GM bats 1,000. I've made this point on Twitter before. Bruce Nolan has, many have. You don't get a hit every time you make a draft pick. Now, this one stings a little more because we traded up for him and it was a 2nd rounder, but even second rounders are like the hit rate's going to be less than 50% on these guys hitting and being major contributors to football teams. So the fact that he's even able to get something out of him, we know that these picks that Bean gets in these trades, these later round picks, he oftentimes finds a way to package them and use them in another deal down the road. So let's wait and see kind of what happens with that one.
And then that brings us to, like you mentioned, the depth. Luke Tenuta was a 6th-round draft pick. A lot of people, like when I post like 53-man roster projections, I put Luke Tenuta on there more times than I don't. Luke Tenuta, it's just easy check. He goes on the practice squad. But you saw last year a 7th-round pick, not a 6th-round pick, but a 7th-round pick, Jack Anderson, quickly taken off our practice squad, and he's now in Philadelphia. A couple of years ago, you saw how badly Brandon Beane was stung. He was stung by that, so much so that he carried Connor McDermott as a 10th offensive lineman, and we all lost our mind that one year. So it shows you that when the Bills do like a guy on the offensive line, they're willing to carve out a roster spot for him, even if we as fans don't see it or think he's better on the practice squad. So I think Luke Tenuta it's a big game for him. It'll be interesting to see if he makes the roster. And it's also, I don't think it'll be interesting. Buffalo Bills handle Tommy Doyle. Tommy Doyle is not a finished product. He got a lot of run in training camp. He was playing with starters, all these things. He came out in his first preseason game. He looked better than he did last year, but he didn't look like a world beater. And then he hurt his foot. So do you put Tommy Doyle on IR? Like bring him onto the 53 and then IR him and then bring a guy like Van Roten or Bobby Hart back? Do you carry Tommy Doyle and Luke Tenuta as your depth? Because that's scary. That's the point I'm trying to get at. If Tommy Doyle and Luke Tenuta are part of your 9-man offensive line rotation, that's scary depth. But if it's more like Manx and Van Roten and Quessenberry when Brown finally gets comfortable, etc., that's a little less scary. But I don't know. Is there any way that, do you envision any way in which Tommy Doyle and Luke Tenuta are depth offensive linemen on this football team on the active 53?
Man, I could see it if they somehow keep 10 offensive linemen, but I don't see any way now. Like, to me, after this move to trade Cody Ford, like that locks in to me Bobby Hart and probably even Greg Van Roten to this roster. And so where are you going to find a spot for Luke Tenuta? Maybe the Bills do try to find something because they got burned with trying to put Jack Anderson on the practice squad last year, and they don't want to see that happen again. Like, the thing that's scary to me is, like, you're talking about Spencer Brown, David Quessenberry, and Deion Dawkins, right? Like, what else do you have, right? I mean, it is razor thin. And while I'm not really comfortable, as you phrased it, with those guys necessarily being the depth tackles, I don't know that we have another option. And that's the problem right now, is this depth, especially at tackle, is very worrisome.
I mean, John Herring comes in and says Tenuta is not ready to be in an NFL game. Neither was Tommy Doyle. And he made the 53-man roster last year. So, like, are you keeping one or the other? Are you keeping them both? Like, that'll be interesting to see. And like I said, I think Tenuta should go to the practice squad. I agree. I don't know if the Buffalo Bills brass agrees with me. My dad comes in to wish me a happy birthday. Thank you, Dad. Appreciate it. With the super chat. It's like I'm getting an allowance all over again. I am 32 years young today. So what a wonderful birthday gift from the Buffalo Bills these last couple of days. But yeah, let's move on to the wide receivers now, and talk about Isaiah Hodgins and zero in on Isaiah Hodgins here. So a lot of people want Isaiah Hodgins on the 53-man roster, myself included. I'm a big fan of his game. I like, how far he's come and he's developed. I've mentioned it on previous shows, but the further we get to the 53-man cut down day, the more I feel like it is Hodgins versus Kumaro, not Hodgins as a possible 7th man or Hodgins versus Crowder. I feel like it's Hodgins versus Kumaro. And at least in the Bills' mind, I don't think it's a battle that Isaiah Hodgins is going to win, because I don't think he's been all that, like I said, I'm not an expert, and it's not exactly like you have the best tape with the all-22 not out there. It doesn't exactly look like he is crushing it on special teams, and Jake Kummerow is a proven special teamer, and Brandon Beane went out of his way to make sure that he noted how important special teams was to these bottom of the roster guys and making the football team. So first of all, thank you to people in the comment section for the birthday wishes. I appreciate it. And Dave, what do you think about the sort of the Isaiah Hodgins situation and what's going on at the back of the wide receiver depth chart?
Yeah, I mean, our guy Eric Turner did put some clips out there of Hodgins kind of having a few gaffes on special teams, kick return unit with blocking, just looking lost out there, and you do worry about that a little bit. I think we just need to realize what is the role of wide receiver 6 on this team. If you're, and it comes down to what do you expect out of wide receiver 6? Do you expect wide receiver 6 to be a significant contributor to the offense? I don't. Unless there's significant injuries to the group, like I really don't expect wide receiver 6 to be a significant contributor to the offense. I do expect that person to be a core teams player, and that's really been the history of wide receiver 6, 7s, whatever, throughout, the NFL the last 2 decades, right? Is that player is like a special teamer through and through. And we've seen this in the past with guys like Sam Aiken and Marcus Easley and others, right? Specifically talking about the Bills. So for me, I do want that team's player to be. I do give a little bit of an edge to that team's player, in this case, Jake Kummerow, right? And so while I like the prospect of Isaiah Hodgins developing into a decent NFL wide receiver in the future, like I just don't know that the cost benefit of having him on the roster in 2022 over Kummerow really makes a ton of sense if he's never going to play on offense. So that's where I come out on this whole Hodgins Kummerow debate.
And Ned Ryerson comes in. He says, why do we always put Hodgins versus Kummerow? Shouldn't it be Hodgins versus Crowder, given the lack of special teams contribution? I think you're 100% correct. And that's sort of the conversation we've had on this show is we have been stating for a couple of weeks that we personally believe it's Isaiah Hodgins versus versus Jamison Crowder. But I think the Bills don't see it that way. I think the Bills see Jamison Crowder as a veteran, a reliable guy, a guy they want on this team for a Super Bowl run, even though maybe, he hasn't won fans over this preseason. I think the Bills still appreciate him. They've given him a pretty decent contract, show how much they appreciate him and his skill set. So with that being said, as much as I personally am with you, Ned, I don't know if the Bills are. And I think the number of snaps Isaiah Hodgins has taken on special teams this preseason sort of backs that up a little bit. And also, not to mention, but until recently, the lack of special teams reps for Kummerow. So like they know what they have in Kummerow. They want to see it from Isaiah Hodgins. So I'm with you, Ned. I just don't know if the Bills are with you and with us here. All right, tight ends. Actually, did I miss anything on receiver? And Silas comes into the super chat. He says, excellent point. Hodgins versus Crowder. Sanders took snap away from Gabe Davis. Why make the same mistake again? And yeah, I mean, this year, Khalil Shakir's in that Gabe Davis role, right? And I think Gabriel Davis is more in that Emmanuel Sanders role, if not even a more alpha version of that role. What do you think about Silas' super chat and just maybe the depth of the receiver room, Dave?
Yeah, and look, I mean, Sanders did have his moments last year, right? I mean, he had a couple drops, I get that, but like he played generally like okay for a guy his age, and like with the expectations that at least a lot of us had for him weren't like necessarily super high. I do think a lot of people did not want to see him take away from Gabe Davis, but we saw towards the end of the season, obviously, and during the playoffs that Gabe really elevated. So I like that super chat from Silas there. I do think, though, that I guess the difference is like, yes, Crowder versus Hodgins made more sense, but then it's like, well, what do the Bills value more from a depth perspective right now is like having a slot guy behind McKenzie, knowing that Shakir's played a ton on the outside so far in this preseason, or having a guy like Hodgins who's more of an outside guy. In the beginning, before camp, I would have probably said they would have valued Hodgins more because it looked like our depth at slot was very, very long, right? We had McKenzie, we had Crowder, we had Shakir listed there, right? And so like now you see it's really come down to really Isaiah McKenzie as the slot and a little bit of Shakir sprinkled in and Crowder, right? So it's going to be fascinating. And I think it's been one of those conversations around wide receiver 6 or even 7 that is finally going to come to a head on Tuesday. And we'll get our closure on this topic one way or another. And think about how much more complicated it would have been if Marquez Stevenson wasn't injured and he was still in the mix too. So it does take one variable out of the equation.
Yeah. On to tight end before so minutes left, 20 minutes or so left. Tight ends. It's going to be interesting to see who plays today. It seems like my Wi-Fi is struggling. So Dave, quick, in case, my voice isn't the greatest right now. I do apologize for my Wi-Fi connection. I'm not usually doing a show this early here on the West Coast. Maybe my neighbors like to use internet. Did you get me there? Can you hear me?
No. Oh yeah. Now I can. I lost you for a second there.
But Sweeney, Howard, and Morris,
Man.
what do you expect from these guys?
Yeah, this has been quite the been a lot of heated debates on Twitter about TE3 or even TE2 if you want to go that far. It's been documented, and the film guys from Cover One have documented that Howard's blocking has been pretty decent during the preseason. There's a lot of reports from the beat guys about how Sweeney's been performing really well in practice, but I come out with you on this. I need to see it in game action, even if it's preseason. Sweeney just hasn't shown it in game action. And this is Sweeney's last stand. It's like Custer's last stand right here. Sweeney's got to show something in this game. And I would expect that he's got to get opportunity, right? This is a big decision for the Bills because it has knock-on effect to the rest of the roster. Do they feel comfortable keeping 3 tight ends and then potentially taking a roster spot away from somewhere else? Or is Tommy Sweeney just going to kind of fade into the sunset, and they're going to be comfortable with what they did last year and only keep 2, and that being OJ Howard and Dawson Knox? I personally don't see any way. It would be a big shock to me if OJ Howard somehow is a surprise cut. I just don't see it happening. So to me, the question comes down to: do you keep 2 or 3 tight ends? Sweeney's got to ball out tonight with Matt Barkley or whoever's throwing him the ball, and make the coaches think a little bit, right? To whether or not they should keep that 3rd tight end. And I'm not saying that it's unlikely that they keep 3 tight ends. It's actually quite possible that they do. It's not my preference, but I still think Sweeney needs to show a little something to just make that decision for them a little bit more clear.
Yeah, and let's transition now to the defense. Let's give your thoughts on the defensive line. What do we expect from the depth defensive lineman today?
Well, your guy Mike Love, he's been playing well in the preseason. He's been getting special team snaps. I think Eric put an image out the other day that showed that Mike Love was one of the top 4 or 5 special team snaps players during the preseason for the Bills. So he is getting some run. A lot of people in the comment section mentioned Kingsley Jonathan. Is he going to make an impression tonight? I think he's got a really good chance to make the practice squad if he has a good game tonight, and he probably has a good chance to make the practice squad anyway, but he could kind of solidify that practice squad spot tonight if he has a good game. As far as the rest of the depth, I think that, I think Shaq Lawson's probably going to play tonight just because they're going to have to, just from a numbers game. And then guys like Brandon Bryant in the middle and Prince Emili, it'll be fun to watch them. As I mentioned on the Broncos post-game show, I've liked what I've seen from Brandon Bryant throughout this preseason, and he's probably going to solidify, hopefully, himself a practice squad spot tonight as well. I will say this: I don't think anything from a coaching staff decision making standpoint as far as who's making the 53 is going to change tonight for the defensive line. I think the defensive line is probably pretty set on who's going to make the team. So I think it's probably guys maybe even jockeying for who might make the practice squad over others. So Mike Love, Kingsley Jonathan, Brandon Bryant, important night for those guys to try to kind of just solidify their spots on the practice squad. And I think Judge is still having some issues with his internet. So, like, what does the comment section think about the defensive line, right? Is there any going to be any real surprise player that we don't foresee right now, maybe making a last pitch to kind of make the 53? Because I just personally don't see it. But maybe some people would disagree. Like, I know there's a lot of Kingsley Jonathan fans in the comments section. And we have Jessica saying, you mean Shaq will be making the team 9 on the D line? Yes, I do think that, right? I do think that we're going to keep 5 defensive ends, 4 defensive tackles. I feel pretty confident that that's going to be the case. I think that the Bills would probably like to have that option to, move a couple of the defensive ends inside during games. I think 9 is the right number. I think that's a sweet spot. I think the only surprise here would not necessarily be have someone else make the team as the 9th, but maybe if the Bills do decide to only keep 8, I just don't see that. I just don't see that happening. So, Silas asks, Epinesa gets moved. I don't think so. I wouldn't say that at this point. He's played pretty well during the preseason, and I wouldn't say he's been like flashy, but he's been steady. And I think it would be a little bit, I just don't think the Bills would get what they should in return if they tried to move him. So I don't think that's the case. I think Epinesa and Basham will be the second wave in when you see the rotation start during the season. You obviously have Rousseau and Vaughn out there to start, and I think Basham and Epinesa will be kind of like your second rotation through on the ends, and then Shaq will play sort of situationally. I think running downs and things like that when maybe guys like Vaughn need a breather and Shaq needs to come in on some early downs and give them that option to kind of be that run edge player. So we're going to try to get Judge back in here. Let's see if we can get him back in. He's back. Is he there? Can't hear you. You got no audio. So we'll see if he gets back in here. Nope, nothing. Okay. All right. Wait.
Can you hear me now?
There he is. He's back.
There we go.
By chance says Kingsley Jonathan has been the best pass rusher on film in the roster. Is there even a chance he makes the team? Yeah, I think there's a chance. Like, Kingsley Jonathan maybe could be the guy that surprises over Shaq Lawson, right? Like that could be the dark horse, sort of very unexpected move that happens. I think it's a low percentage, but it's not zero, right? It's not zero. So he has looked really good, and Eric's done a lot of good film breakdown of Kingsley as well. So it's a good point here by chance.
Yeah, I think Kingsley Jonathan's a guy who I wouldn't go as far as to push Shaq Lawson, especially after the game. Like you mentioned, it's not a 0% chance, but I think Kingsley Jonathan's got a legit chance tonight to pass Mike Love for that practice squad spot. So I think that's worth noting with Kingsley Jonathan. And Ryan Sullivan comes in the comment section. It's also worth noting that he was a CFL #1 pick. So he could end up heading over to the CFL as well, or at least you see that that's the kind of value that he might have, is that he would be a top draft pick in the CFL as well. So super interesting to see what happens along that D line. CJ Brewer, Prince Amelia, they have a shot to try to push maybe a guy like Ilianku. I think Brandon Bryan has proven his worth, but if Brandon Bryan gets claimed, one of those guys have a shot to do that as well. Linebacker. I'm going to have my eyes on linebacker a ton tonight, whether it's Andre Smith, who plays with his hair on fire, or it's Balon Spector playing for possibly that 6th linebacker spot. Joe Giles Harris, a guy who always seems to play well in the 4th quarter of preseason games. It'll be really interesting to see how this linebacker depth plays out. But before I give you a chance, someone says that I'm doing my best Bill Belichick impression with this shirt. I actually wore this for Matt Rule. Everyone knows how much I love Matt Rule. I wear the Matt Rule hoodie today with the cutoff, but as an homage to the fact that we're playing Matt Rule today. But what are your thoughts on the linebacker spot? Do we keep 6? That's what's holding me up. We always keep 6. Do we keep 6?
Probably. I'll say probably. And I think that if it was me, I would keep 5. I'd put Spector on the practice squad, and then I'd see how the linebacker situation plays out once Andre Smith's suspension is up, right? That's kind of how I would play it if it was me. Save that roster spot for someone else. There's no real risk. It's like very, very low risk of Balen Spector being a guy that gets claimed through waivers. I would not expect that to happen at all. So you can put him on the practice squad, go into the season with 5 linebackers and wait out Andre Smith's suspension and then assess after that 5 or 6 games whether or not you really feel like you need that 6th linebacker on the team. So, that to me would be the best sort of finessing, if you will, of roster management or roster construction, because you're not really losing any core special team player in that situation unless you do expect Balen Spector to be a core special team player right away, which he has played well. So that's why I think that my heart leans 5, but my head kind of leans that the Bills will keep 6, and I think it will be Balen Spector as the 6th. And I think that unfortunately for Joe Giles Harris, like he's that veteran that can just destroy depth players in the fourth quarter of preseason games, but he's not quite good enough to make the team. So,
and I think I said on the show last week, like if it was 1996, like Joe Giles Harris would be like a starting linebacker in the National Football League, but just not today in today's NFL. But he's a solid depth piece and a good guy to have sort of on the practice squad there. Apparently there was a tweet from Sal Capaccio. I was just looking it up as you were speaking. He's been told there's a 30-minute delay for the football game. I don't know if that's a lightning strike in the area or what the reason for the delay is, but it seems like there might be a little bit of a delay. So we might be able to get some superlatives today, even though I have none planned. We can maybe wing some superlatives today. But we still got a couple more positions to talk about here. Cornerback. Looking at the cornerback competition, I know most of the starters aren't playing tonight. It's going to be interesting to see if Dane Jackson gets run. That's the first clue. Like, it seems like Dane Jackson's the one they're most serious about. So does he play at all tonight after missing the first game, playing in the second game? And the second is I would still like Kyer Elam and Christian Benford to get a half. Like, I want to see these guys get as much playing time as possible, see as many live bullets as possible. What are your thoughts just for now on these 3 guys? And we'll get into the depth pieces in a moment.
I mean, they certainly trust Dane, right? I mean, he's kind of been the first guy out, and they've rotated Benford and Elam. But I'm not opposed to Dane getting some run tonight. I mean, I think I would treat Dane as almost like a pseudo sort of starter, like get him 15, 20 snaps and then maybe get him out of there. Like the last thing you really need is an injury to one of these corners, given that we are already looking like I guess it's probably looking like Trey's not going to be ready for week 1. So I don't think if you're the Bills that you want to go into week 1 with 2 rookies as your starting corners, that being Kyer Elam and Christian Benford. So I think there is a little bit of protection here that has to be afforded to Dane Jackson. You can say what you will about Dane Jackson and sort of like how you feel about him as a prospect or as a player, but I really don't think the Bills will be comfortable trotting out 2 rookies as their corners in week 1. I could be wrong. So I would like to see a lot out of Elam and probably more so Benford tonight, but I do think it's going to be a lot of Nick McLeod. I think it's going to be a lot of Cam Lewis tonight. I think you're going to see a lot of Jamarcus Ingram, who got burned on a play last week. So you're going to see a lot of him. And so, yeah, I mean, the fact is like we've said about some of the other positions, like it's a numbers game. Like some of these guys are going to have to play, right? And it's probably going to be Benford and Ingram and Lewis mostly, I would expect.
And that's just sort of the weirdest part about this too. Like I mentioned, it's, you don't want guys to get hurt. You don't want to risk injuries, but also your roster is 10 guys short, 11 guys, today too, plus injuries and taking all your starters out. So a lot of these guys, like where you think, well, the wash game, they're not going to get run. They could get run. Benford, Elam included. The Cam Lewis thing is super interesting. Like we've sort of been saying it on this show. If Trey White starts the season on the PUP list, I think Cam Lewis is all but a roster lock. Even if Trey White comes off the PUP list, I think you can make the case for Cam Lewis to be DB10 because the Bills have him playing at safety. He had 2 special teams tackles last week. He could play nickel. He could play boundary. You got him at the safety. Like, they are just putting him everywhere. It seems like the Buffalo Bills just really want Cam Lewis to be a part of this football team, and they're trying to finagle a way to sort of justify it. Are you reading into it the same way that I am?
Yeah, I am. And I think it also it's a very interesting situation, right? Because if Trey White, your star corner, comes to you and he gets cleared medically and he's ready to go week 1, you're not going to sit there and say, well, sorry, Trey, like, we're going to still put you on, IR and just to keep Cam Lewis on this team. Like, you hate to say, like, your fate of Cam Lewis is dependent on, like, the very top corner on the team's health, but that's kind of what it's come down to. And if the top corner on the team's health is good and he's ready to go, you can't sit there and look at Trey White and say, sorry, we're still going to make the decision to not, activate you to start the season. So I still think it's going to be a non-issue, because I do think Trey White ends up on IR to start the season. And I do think that Cam Lewis will make the team. So again, another one of those situations where it could be a blessing in disguise for the Bills, kind of like what happened with Marquez Stevenson last year, where they were able to get him on IR and they were able to kind of keep McKenzie and others on the team. So, yeah, I think Cam Lewis has an inside track right now, the way it's kind of trending.
And, other depth DBs, I know Jessica Tennis was mentioning Nick McLeod. He was sort of the big one last year, and then he was definitely the big one, it seems like, all of OTAs, and then the beginning of training camp. He was getting the same talk as Cam Lewis, but that talk has kind of gone away. They've started playing him more at safety. He was claimed off waivers by the Bengals last year. There's definitely possibly a market for him, because he was the only waiver claim that was made last year. The thing that we talked about last week is he hasn't made any splash plays this preseason. Josh Thomas, a guy who almost we thought Josh Thomas would be pushing Jaquan Johnson last year because he was making splash plays in the preseason. While I'm not saying Nick McLeod and Josh Thomas aren't as good this year, they're certainly not making those splash games on live television. So if they have a big game tonight, I think both Nick McLeod or Josh Thomas, I don't think they're making this football team, but I think they could make a push to make another football team. So this is one of those things where I would like to slide them both onto practice squad, but if one of them blows up tonight, there's a chance they could get claimed, but I think it's a very, very low percentage chance, because as Jason Taylor comes in, Say did cut him and he was waived, and the Bills were the only team that sort of wanted him back after he cleared waivers. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? Because those are the 2 big depth pieces. Jamarcus Ingram is just, I don't want to say he's just a guy because my, UB connection, but he's just a guy. Like, Jamarcus Ingram doesn't have a future here. What are your thoughts on Thomas and on Nick McLeod?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love for both of them to be on the Bills practice squad. You look at Cincinnati last year. I mean, they were really hurt in the secondary at the beginning of the year, so they obviously took a chance on him, and even they said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. So I do think that, again, like, Nick McLeod having gone through the waivers process before and being claimed, but again, this year, maybe not, not showing a ton different maybe than what he showed last year, other than kind of the reports we're getting from practice, not really showing it in the games. I think you're not going to have any issue putting him on the practice squad if you choose to do so. Same thing with Josh Thomas. So I'm not so worried about those guys. If the Bills do want to bring them back to the practice squad, I think they have a really good chance to do so. But those would be probably the 2 guys, if you're looking at players that could be claimed. And I'm not saying it's over 50% chance, but I'm just saying players who could be claimed, those would be guys that I'd kind of put on the list.
Looking for an update here right now on time. Nothing past Sal Capaccio has been told there's a 30-minute delay. Let me go to the Buffalo Bills official handle. Maybe they started tweeting again. Who knows? Oh, it's just a picture of Josh Allen and Sam Darnold, so I don't know. So I haven't seen anything about this game getting pushed. if anyone in the comment section wants to give us an update and let us know if they've seen anything else, let us know. But other than one Sal Capaccio tweets, nope, here's the Carolina Panthers. They're under shelter in place. They'll update approximately every 30 minutes. So no update, and we have a 30-minute delay. So we're going to keep on chugging along here at the Air Raid Hour. There's a couple of players. Maybe let's give some love to some guys in the secondary we haven't talked about, right? Maybe you can pull up the wild card video real quick, because I have a guy who might be a wild card player tonight. So can you pull up the wild card video, since I don't have access to that anymore?
Yeah, I will. Give me 1 second. All right, here we go.
Guys, why aren't the brakes working?
Because I cut the brakes! Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
How about Jordan Miller, right? The guy who we signed right at the beginning of training camp. I liked him coming out a couple of years ago, University of Washington as sort of a late round pick. He's been a quiet guy this preseason. You know, he's a guy who I think could, with Tim Harris getting cut a couple of weeks ago, it's been Jordan Miller who's stuck around. So I'm not saying Jordan Miller's going to like push for a 53-man roster spot. I'm not crazy, but you know, he can make a couple of plays here tonight because he can get some solid run in the second half. And I wouldn't be surprised if a guy that we don't really talk about, Jordan Miller, winds up on the practice squad, and maybe he's a guy we're talking about like Nick McLeod next season. So Jordan Miller is a name to keep an eye on, and I'm rooting for DeMar Hamlin to make a couple plays tonight because he hasn't been bad. We talked about this last week, but he hasn't made those splash plays either. So our boy DeMar has got to step it up tonight as well in the secondary.
It would be nice to see DeMar season with a splash play. I think the wild card for me is Kingsley Jonathan, who we've mentioned in the comments section as well. I could see him out on a real high note tonight, making a couple, maybe a multi-sack game for Kingsley Jonathan with as much playing time as we expect him to get. So I really like him, and I, Neil Pau, I mean, he's going to get a ton of run tonight. He might score a touchdown. I know he was like one part of my hot take a couple of weeks ago, but now Kingsley Jonathan will be my wild card tonight. I think he's going to make an impression for sure.
Yeah. And Jessica Tess has a super chat. If you want to pull that up, I can't pull those up, but she says Trey has to be close. Otherwise he would be on the PUP list. Brandon B made it seem like they just wanted to take it really down to the wire. So I think the Bills are literally going to make that decision like Tuesday morning, right? Like, could we get him back in the first 3 weeks of the season? And if they think they can get him back on the field in the first 3 weeks of the season, maybe they roster him. And I think another thing to consider too is you're not just going to activate Trey White and then start him next week, right? Like you're not going to activate Trey White on September 3rd and play him on September 8th. I think Trey White could need 2-3 weeks of practice before he's ready to step out into a football field. So if you put him on the PUP list, he can't even get on the practice field until week 4. And then you have 3 weeks to make the decision. So you have 3 weeks to get him up to snuff and get him sort of conditioned and acclimated. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, maybe Trey White doesn't play until week 4, but you don't PUP him because you want him practicing sooner than that. So I think that might go into the Bills' thinking as well.
It very well might, and I think this is a very interesting question from Spin. How many convenient injuries occurred by the players on the IR? And
I
mean, look,
it's raining, it's wet, it's a slippery field.
It's a slippery field. It's happened in the past. It's possible. We'll see. Could Isaiah Hodgins come up with a interesting injury today? We will see. I'm not wishing that on him, obviously, but like a phantom injury, maybe maybe hurt his ankle or something and running in the puddles or something. Like something happens. But so that's the wild card. Where do we want to go next for superlative?
We go for the hot take because I got one I want to throw out there.
All right.
Oh my God! We're having a fire sale! Oh, the burning! It burns me! Evacuate all the school children! Oh, me! This isn't a fever! Sing, Gray! Can't even see where the knob is!
So my hot take here is, listen, I said it was going to be embarrassing before the game started, but I pulled up some tweets here. I forgot who was the one tweeting it. But apparently Matt Barkley is just slinging it all over the field with his leg in pregame warmups. So according to a couple of people, his punts are going 40, 45, 50 yards in the air.
Wow.
So maybe Matt Barkley's got a leg. Maybe we can just keep Matt Barkley on the 53 as the third quarterback / punter. But in all seriousness,
that's an efficient use of a roster spot, right?
It looks like Case Keenum's going to hold tonight.
Yeah, Case Keenum's
and Matt Barkley's going to kick the punts. But I'm going to go with Matt Barkley, the punter, as my wild card player of the game, and Matt Barkley, the quarterback. I legitimately believe the Bills are going to try to hide Raheem Blackshear, and I think Spin comes in the offer. There's no chance for my getting 50. I think that Matt Barkley could throw the ball 35 plus times tonight.
Yeah,
So,
and hey, one for 27 yards from Renaissance Man, but that's the equivalent of a Matt Hawk shank. So hey, can't be worse.
Will he drop it? Will he take 45 seconds to catch and then kick it? Those are the questions you got to ask yourself.
I'm saying my hot take of the night is Duke Johnson has over 100 rushing yards in this game.
The Panthers are playing the starters. Let's remember that, though.
And I'm only saying that because I don't want Raheem Blackshear to I do want Raheem Blackshear to succeed. If he plays tonight, I want him to do well. I would never root against him, but I also know that Raheem Blackshear could put himself into the conversation of a guy that could get swiped because of his ability on special teams, right? He has return ability. He can play some special teams, and I know he's not like a not necessarily a core 4 phaser yet, but he's also shown the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He's had some nice shifty moves during the preseason, and I know running backs are considered lesser value in today's NFL, but he has put some nice things on tape, and so again, I don't think the Bills are at a huge risk of losing him, but I wouldn't mind seeing Duke Johnson tote the rock a ton tonight.
A bunch of people coming in talking about, some Matt Barkley predictions here. I had this take on Twitter right before we hopped on the show. I would like to see the Bills not punt or go for an extra point at all this game. My reasoning was what Reed Ferguson can do. What Tyler Bass can do. What's the point? You're just going to go out there and embarrass yourself with some guy who's not a punter punting.
Well,
some guy who's not a holder holding. And it's whatever. I get, you could test your emergencies. It's whatever. But the more I think about it, these guys are playing for their lives, and they're playing for their lives, and a lot of them have to prove it on special teams. So, that just sucks. It's just really unfortunate the Bills weren't able to get another punter in here, because a lot of these guys who are trying to make this team, they're going to struggle to prove themselves gunning on a punt when Matt Barkley's probably shanking it 20 yards or whatever it is that happens. So it's disappointing, but we'll see how things shake out. I'm staying off of social media, I think, for this game, because I just think the national media is going to be just heaping piles and piles of shit upon us. Other fan bases are going to be heaping piles and piles of shit upon us. I think it's going to get ugly in this game. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but it'll be interesting to see how the Bills respond, right? We saw the Denver Broncos last week they didn't look like an NFL team. Do the Bills come out and have a semblance of professionalism through all of what's going on over the past 24 hours? Does a professional football team with all these distractions now still walk onto the football field and play like a professional football team? It'll be really interesting to see how this all unfolds.
It will be. And this is their last chance to kind of see the live bullets, right? So they need to be, I think they will. I do. I think they will. And, ultimately, I think then this kind of reflects that the Bills did make the right decision in the prior games and giving guys like Hodgins a ton of special team snaps and not giving Kumaro because they knew what they had in him. So for these types of situations, let's say, punt coverage or whatever, maybe you're not going to get the best assessment, but fortunately you've already had a good amount of assessment so far. I know it's only 2 games, but this is the life we live in now with only 3 preseason games. So it makes it, I think fans like fewer preseason games, but I don't necessarily think coaches like fewer preseason games. So, I mean, some probably do, but like, the guys trying to make the bottom of the roster, they probably hate it. So, so yeah. And we got one more super chat coming in from Silas. Stay off Twitter. Browns fans smell blood. I will be doing the same. I will not be partaking in social media during this game. We'll be back here on Monday recapping the action, and hopefully there'll be some more clarity around this entire situation by then.
Yeah, 100%. Plus, we'll have the 53-man roster cut down to talk about Trey White news. Well, the Bills will have to make a decision on Trey White, by then probably as well, or at least on Tuesday morning. So a whole bunch of things to talk about. Thank you guys for sticking with us through this pregame show. Thank you for sticking with us through my technical difficulties. So appreciate you having to stare at me for the last half hour here, not in HD. So kudos to you for being able to put up with that. I'm sure a lot of you, put your phone in your pocket and were just listening once I had to switch my camera. But thank you guys for your patience with me and my camera. Thank you guys for that conversation in the beginning. It's a tough conversation, right? Like it's a really difficult conversation to have. I'm glad we could have it. It's definitely something we stumbled through because I think it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about. And it's things that people don't want to talk about. Some people feel really strongly on one side and some people feel strongly on the other. And it's never fun to have to talk about those things when you should be talking about football. But thank you guys for sticking with us and having that conversation with us and talking through it with us. And then thank you for sticking with us through the technical difficulties in the rest of the show. So until next time, thankful to be part of Bills Mafia, and go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?